Welcome to the first technique video in this series on how to add beads to crochet. I hope you've already watched the introductory video that showed the swatch with all the techniques. This video will show you what happens when you pre-string the beads and then add the beads in between stitches. I will demonstrate the technique first, and then I'll discuss the pros and cons of doing it this way. So let's get started. I am in double crochet. I've worked my turning chains, so I'm essentially at the end of a stitch. I have not yet started the next stitch. I slide a bead up into position, and then I work the next stitch. In this case, that's a double crochet, so yarn over, anchor, pull through, and finish off. And because that was so quick and easy, I am going to do it again. My pre-strung bead comes up into position. I can hang on to it with my index and middle fingers. I could hang on to it with my index finger and my thumb. You no doubt will figure out what works for you. And then I work the next stitch. And that could be anything. It could be a single crochet, a half double crochet, a double crochet, a treble crochet, whatever. I don't have to make any change to how I work that stitch. I just work it. So let's see what we got. To do this technique, you have to string all the beads ahead of time. If you are in all one color, as I am here, that's not really an issue. But if you want multiple colors, and if you want to be very specific about which bead is which color, then you have to string them in order. And you have to string them in reverse order, which means you string the last bead you're going to use, you string first, and the first bead you're going to use, you string last. If you string them correctly, that's great because they're on a string, they can't change position, but if you made a mistake, it is a pain to correct it. Also, if you're using lots of beads, you want to pick beads that have nice smooth interiors and or yarn that is good and strong, because you're pulling the yarn through lots of beads. If the beads are rough, that will tear up your yarn, it'll abrade the yarn, and the yarn will get weak, and then the yarn could break and your project would fall apart, and that would not be good. On the positive side, once beads are strung, they're not going anywhere. So if you like to put your project in your bag and take it with you, a project where the beads are pre-strung is rather portable. This technique gives you a bead that is in a horizontal orientation rather than a vertical orientation. With the plain beads I have here, that doesn't really matter, but with some beads that will definitely make a difference. In this technique with the double crochet, I get a fabric that is reversible. So I'm fairly happy with what I got here. The bead is held on only one strand of yarn, which looks a little precarious, but it is nestled in between the posts of the double crochet. And as I say, it's reversible, so I'm pretty happy with that. I did the same technique at the bottom of my swatch, and I did it in single crochet. And here I had lesser success. The beads seem to want to stay on the opposite side of the fabric from the side I worked from, so I worked from this side and the beads ended up over here. I can push the beads through to the other side. I'll show you what that looks like. So see, I can push them through. It's okay. I'm not completely happy with it. So I would say in single crochet, this is maybe not reversible, but in double crochet it is. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is this technique does not really disrupt your chain. You've got a bead there, but you can see where your chain is. You can see where to put your hook on the next row. And that leads me to the other swatch. I think this technique is rather well suited to working a mesh. So I have worked a double crochet chain one, double crochet chain one. In this case, I work the double crochet, slide the bead into position, chain one, double crochet, slide the bead into position, chain one, double crochet. And you can see on the next row I am working into the chain. So I am putting my hook here, which is just above the bead, rather than here, which would be down in the space. And you can see in this technique the bead sort of dangles down into the space. It doesn't really move around anywhere, and it is reversible. So if I wanted to make a mesh where I'm working into the chain, not into the space, and I wanted to add beads and maybe use a pretty yarn, I think this technique would work well for that. If you like making loopy edgings where you chain a bunch and single crochet and chain a bunch, here's what you get when you slide a bead in on every chain. So once again, the bead is attached with only one strand of yarn, but you see both legs of the chain. So when you use this technique to make long chains, you see the beads and you see quite a bit of the yarn. Both of them are prominent. So let me grab the original swatch again. So there you are. That was the first technique, pre-stringing the beads and sliding the bead in between stitches. In the next video, I'll show you what happens when you pre-string the beads, but you add the bead in the middle of making the stitch. See you at the next video. Happy crochet!